Immigrant child asks for alms on the street, and find that the driver was the father who disappeared. The red light of the traffic light seemed to last an eternity when Lucia, just 8, hit the luxurious car window with her small, dirty hand. "Please, sir, a reel to eat?" The man inside the black Mercedes didn't even look. It just nodded with a hand, annoyed, like an uncomfortable fly. Lucia had learned to recognize this gesture. It was the same who received dozens of times a day on the streets of Miami, where she and her mother Carmen lived 3 years after fleeing violence in Venezuela. "Piss, come here," calmed across the street, his voice carried by the tiredness of those who work 16 hours a day as a day laborer and still needs to supplement the income asking on the streets. "Leave this man alone." But something made Lucia hesitate. There was something familiar in that profile, in that way of holding the wheel. Her brown eyes, inheritance of a father who disappeared when she was only 2 years old, settled in the car rearview mirror. The signal opened and Mercedes advanced, but not before Lucia could read the plate. "Diego 1, your heart shot, Diego." The same name her mother murmured in tears during the difficult nights when she thought her daughter was sleeping. That night, shrunk on the fine mattress that divided with his mother in the small apartment in Little Havana, Lucia couldn't sleep. For years, he had fantasized about his father who never knew right, a man Carmen described as affectionate, hardworking, but had to go to find a better life for the family. But there were details that never fit. Why did he never send money? Why did the phone number change? And why, in the few moments when Carmen thought her daughter wasn't listening, she whispered words like coward and liar before she quickly corrects herself. "Mom," whispered Lucia in the dark, "do you think Dad still thinks of us?" Carmen swallowed the cry that always came with that question. "Of course, me love. Wherever he is, I'm sure he thinks of us every day." But his voice trembled in a way that Lucia had learned to recognize. It was the same shaking as when she promised that tomorrow would have enough food, or would soon find a better job. What Carmen didn't know was that Diego Mendoza wasn't far away. In fact, it was right there, just 15 blocks away in its gable choir mansion, celebrating another day of record profits from your import company. 3 years ago, he had made the most cowardly decision of his life, to abandon the family in Venezuela and start over in the United States as if they had never existed. Diego had rebuilt his life meticulously. New social identity, new American wife, 2 stepchildren who called him father. For all purposes, Diego Mendoza, the man who had a family in Venezuela, had died the moment he stepped on American soil. Lucia closed her eyes, but her childish mind was already formulating a plan. The next day I would return to that even traffic light, and if it was really him, if that rich man in the car were the father who abandoned her, well, she would find a way to make him recognize her. For years, Carmen had kept a small box under the bed. Lucia knew her existence, but she had never had the courage to look. That night, when her mother's soft snoring indicated that she had finally fell asleep, the girl slid silently to the box. Inside, he found photos, documents, and something that made his blood freeze. A marriage certificate with the full name Diego Alejandro Mendoza, and a picture of a man who seemed suspiciously familiar. There, in the darkness of that miserable apartment, looking at the picture of a man who smiled next to his pregnant mother, Lucia realized that she had discovered something that would change her lives forever. But what could an 8-year-old do against a rich man who had chosen to forget that he existed? If you are wondering how an 8-year-old could confront the father who abandoned her, be sure to subscribe to the channel, because what Lucia would follow, that would sometimes prove that sometimes a child's innocence may be the most powerful weapon against the cruelty of an adult. For the next 3 weeks, Lucia became a persistent shadow in that traffic light. Every day at 5:30 p.m. when traffic was intense and luxury cars passed through the commercial region, she was there. But it was no longer the desperate girl asking for alms. Now she watched, studied, memorized. The black Mercedes with Diego 1 plaque appeared religiously on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Always the same time, always the same route. The man inside him never looked at him, but Lucia had managed to photograph discreetly with a broken cell phone that a gentle lady had the given. Carmen began to notice changes in her daughter's behavior. "Piss, why are you so long on that corner? And where did you take these photos from?" Lucia showed the blurred images of the man in the car. "Mom, this man, does he look like someone you know?" Carmen's face paled instantly. His hands trembled as he held his cell phone, and for a moment Lucia saw something she had never seen before in her mother's eyes. It wasn't just sadness, it was pure hatred. "Where did you get this?" he whispered Carmen, his voice almost inaudible. "It's him, isn't it? It's Dad who abandoned us." That night, for the first time in 3 years, Carmen told the whole truth. Diego had not broken in search of a better life. He had simply disappeared one morning, taking all the economies of the family and leaving only one note. "Don't look for me. start a new life without me. He knew people here in Miami, explained Carmen, tears dripping freely. It had contacts, business opportunities. It promised you would send money, then we would find him. But when we finally managed to get here, we found that he had changed his name, life, family. Lucia found that her mother had tried to locate him during the first year, but Diego had become unreachable. Worse yet, through acquaintances of the Venezuelan community, Carmen learned that he had married again, this time with a rich American, and now pretended that his previous life never existed. Piss, you have to forget that. He forgot us a long time ago. But Lucia couldn't forget. In the following days, she developed an obsessive routine. He found that Diego owned Mendoza Import Solutions, a company that imported products from Latin America. Through simple Google searches, the few times she could use the library computer, she found that he lived in Choir Gables, had 2 stepchildren, and was a member of an exclusive golf club. What enraged her most was reading about him in local business articles, where she was described as an example of overcoming, an immigrant who arrived in the United States with nothing and built an empire through hard work and dedication to the family. Dedication to the family, muttered Lucia, looking at the miserable apartment where she and her mother slept in the same mattress. It was then that she had an idea that would change everything. If Diego Mendoza had built his new life on the lie that he was a dedicated family man, perhaps it was time for the truth to come out. But how could an 8-year-old child expose a rich and well-connected man? The answer came through Sophia, a local journalist who attended the restaurant where Carmen had gotten extra work on Saturday mornings. Sophia always talked to Carmen about her life, interested in the stories of Venezuelan immigrants. Lucia had observed how Sophia always wrote down everything, how she seemed really interested in stories of injustice, and more importantly, she had noticed how Sophia always talked about giving voice to those who have no voice. During one of these Saturday mornings, Lucia discreetly approached the table where Sophia had coffee. "Madam," she said in a shaky but determined voice, "can I tell a story?" Sophia looked at the girl with genuine interest. "Of course, honey. What kind of story?" "A story about a father who leaves his family in Venezuela, steals their money, and then pretends to be a respectable family man here in Miami." Sophia's eyes illuminated. As an investigative journalist, she had developed an instinct to recognize stories with explosive potential. "Keep talking." Lucia told everything. The stolen economies, the cruel ticket, the discovery of Mercedes, the lies in the newspapers about Diego is an example of overcoming. Sophia wrote down every detail, asking accurate questions that showed her professional experience. "Do you have proof of all this?" Sophia asked. Lucia showed the blurred photos, the documents her mother kept, even the Venezuelan marriage certificate. But what really impressed Sophia was the clarity that this 8-year-old had connected all points. "Lucia, do you understand that this can have serious consequences? For you, for your mother, and especially for him?" The girl nodded severely. "He had serious consequences when he abandoned us. Now it's our turn." That Thursday, when Mercedes Prado stopped in the traffic light for the last time, Diego finally looked straight at Lucia. His eyes met for just 3 seconds, but it was enough. Lucia saw a flash of recognition, immediately followed by something that made her smile. Panic. He had recognized her, and by the way his hand squeezed the steering wheel and how he accelerated as soon as the signal opened, Lucia realized that his simple presence there was already causing the desired effect. Diego Mendoza, H. Avia, spent 3 years pretending that her past did not exist, but the past had just hit the window of his car and had the face of a child he had abandoned when she needed him most. What Diego didn't know was that this seemingly defenseless girl had discovered something that no adults around him had realized, that behind every powerful man who builds his life on lies, there is always a truth waiting patiently to be revealed. And sometimes all the truth needs is a brave child enough not to be afraid of the consequences. But there was something even more dangerous forming in that little strategic mind. Lucia was not just planning to expose her father, she was about to teach him a lesson that would destroy not only his reputation, but the whole structure of lies on which he had built his new privileged life. The following week, Sophia began the deepest investigation of her career. But what she didn't expect was to find that Diego Mendoza wasn't just an absent father, he was a perfect ghost. "Lucia, did your mother have any official wedding document? Any proof that you are really family?" Sophia asked, carefully examining the blurred photos the girl had achieved. Carmen hesitated before showing Venezuelan marriage certificate and Lucia's birth certificate, where he clearly appeared Diego Alejandro Mendoza as a father. But Sophia realized something strange. All American documents from Diego listed her name as Diego A. Miranda. He had completely changed his legal identity. "He not only abandoned you," explained Sophia seriously. He legally erased your existence from your life. It was then that Lucia had an idea that surprised even the experienced journalist. Mrs. Sophia, if he wants to pretend he has no family, maybe we should appear at the party where he will pretend to be a perfect family man. Sophia researched more and found that next week, Diego would be honored by the Miami Chamber of Commerce as Entrepreneur of the Year, an event broadcast live on local television, where he would receive a prize for representing the family values of the Latin community. It's perfect, Sophia murmured, already visualizing the matter. He will be there, proud, receiving an award for being an example of a family, in front of the entire Miami elite. Lucia started attending the library every day, learning everything about Diego Miranda Mendoza. He found that he had even lied about his origin. In business profiles, he said he was orphan who came to the United States with just the dream of prosperity, when he had actually abandoned a wife and daughter in Venezuela. Carmen initially resisted the plan. Piss, this man is powerful. He can deport us, can harm us in ways we haven't even imagined. Mom, said Lucia with a frightening maturity for her 8 years, he has hurt us in the worst possible way. Now it's our turn. Sophia discovered something even more devastating. Diego had not just changed identity. He had married Margaret Whitfield, heiress of a traditional Miami family, never mentioning that she was already married in Venezuela. Technically, he was a bigamo. If we can prove that he has never legally divorced from his mother, explained Sophia, his marriage here is invalid. And if Margaret finds out she was deceived, Lucia absorbed every information as a small strategist. She had realized that Diego always attended the same places, the golf club on Thursdays, the Italian restaurant on Saturdays with the new family, and always passed the same traffic light on Tuesdays and Thursdays. He is methodical, observed Lucia. Methodical people don't like surprises. Sophia got access to the records of the Chamber of Commerce event and found that the ceremony would be broadcast live, with Diego making a speech about the importance of the family in building the American dream. The irony was almost poetic. During her library research, Lucia found something that made her blood boil. A recent interview where Diego said, "I never had biological children, but my stepchildren are my greatest joy. The family we choose is more important than any blood bond." Carmen cried when she read these words. How can he say that? How can you deny that you exist? Lucia, however, smiled. It wasn't a child's smile. It was the smile of someone who had just found the perfect weapon. He wants to pretend I don't exist? Let's see how he reacts when I appear on live television. Sophia meticulously organized the plan. They would have only one chance, and they needed it to be devastating. The journalist had gotten a press credentials for the event, but knew that the hardest part would be to coordinate the perfect timing. Lucia, are you sure you want to do this? Once we start, there is no return. The girl looked through the window of the miserable apartment where she lived with her mother, then looked at Diego's photo in her taller 3000 suit, bolting alongside her new rich family. He chose to forget that I exist, she said calmly. Now I will remind you that some memories cannot be erased no matter how much money you have. What Diego didn't know was that his abandoned daughter had inherited not only her brown eyes, but also her strategic intelligence. The difference was that Lucia would use this intelligence to expose the truth, not to hide it. On the eve of the event, Sophia asked Lucia a question that would change everything. What if he denies? What if you say you are lying? Lucia smiled again, holding something that had secretly kept for weeks. A small growing moon-shaped scar on her right wrist, identical to the one Diego had, the result of an accident they both suffered when she was only 18 months before he deciding that his family was disposable. Some evidence, she said, can't be forged. The annual gala of the Miami Chamber of Commerce was at its peak when Sophia made her discreet entrance to the main hall. Local television cameras were already positioned, broadcasting live the ceremony that celebrated the pillars of the business community to the entire region. Diego Mendoza, or Diego Miranda as he was known there, was radiant in his $1,000 tuxedo, receiving greetings from entrepreneurs, politicians, and social figures. Beside her, Margaret smiled elegantly, using the pearl necklace that had been a wedding gift, a technically invalid marriage. "Ladies and gentlemen," announced the presenter, "it is with great honor that we call our businessman of the year, Diego Miranda, an example of overcoming that came to the United States with only the dream of prosperity, and built an empire based on traditional family values." Diego took the stage under applause, adjusting the microphone as the cameras focused on his confident smile. "My friends," he started, "when I arrived in this country as an orphan, dreaming of an opportunity, it was exactly at this moment that Sophia got up from the audience, holding a portable microphone she had achieved with the production team. Mr. Mendoza, sorry for the interruption, but I have a question about your family. Diego froze on stage. His eyes found Sophia's and then scoured the hall, looking for the security guards. I'm sorry, but this is not the time for questions. It's about your daughter, Sophia continued, now with all cameras facing her. Lucia Mendoza, 8, who lives with her mother Carmen in Little Havana. Would you like to explain to the public why they live asking for alms on the streets while you get a prize for family values? The silence in the hall was deafening. Margaret looked at her husband with growing confusion, while the guests began to whisper with each other. Diego grabbed the microphone tightly, his hands trembling visibly. I don't know what you are talking about. There must be some mistake. It was then that Lucia appeared. Sophia had coordinated perfectly. The girl emerged from the side curtains of the stage, wearing the same simple dress she wore to ask for alms, her brown eyes, identical to those of Diego, fixed on her father who had abandoned her. The cameras captured the exact moment when Diego saw her. His face paled completely and he staggered back as if he had punched his stomach. Lucia, he whispered, forgetting that he had the microphone on. Daddy, said Lucia, her childish voice echoing the sound system of the hall. Why did you leave us? The hall exploded in shocked murmurs. Margaret took the stage, shaking with anger. Diego, who is this child? What is she talking about? Sophia took the confusion to reveal the final bomb. Ladies and gentlemen, I have documents here proving that Diego Alejandro Mendoza, no Miranda, has been legally married to Carmen Mendoza since 2019 in Venezuela. Your marriage to Mrs. Whitfield is technically invalid. The cameras captured Margaret violently pulling the wedding ring and throwing her husband's face. You made me idiot. My family, my reputation, all ruined by a liar. Diego desperately tried to control the situation. Lucia, honey, Daddy can explain. Things are complicated, but Lucia had already prepared for this moment. With a scary maturity for her 8 years, she looked straight at the cameras and said, For 3 years, my mother worked 16 hours a day to support us while my father pretended that we didn't exist. He told me he was orphaned, but I have the photos of our wedding in Venezuela. Sophia showed off the photographs on the screens of the event. Diego smiling next to Carmen pregnant, holding Lucia's ultrasound, promising eternal love in his marriage vows. The mayor took the stage, visibly disturbed. Mr. Miranda, or Mendoza, this ceremony is cancelled. There will be a complete investigation into your credentials and business practices. Diego tried a last desperate card. Lucia, daughter, Daddy can take care of you now. We can be a family again. Lucia looked at him with a coldness that froze the blood of all present. Dad, you have been 3 years old to be our father. Now you will have to learn to be responsible for the consequences of your choices. The latest live images showed Diego being escorted out of the event while journalists shouted questions, Margaret being comforted by the family in shock, and Lucia being embraced by Sophia, an 8-year-old who had just taught an adult man that some betrayals cost more than one can imagine. That night, while the videos viralized on social networks and local news repressed the best moments of Diego's public humiliation, a question echoed in the minds of all who watched. How did an abandoned child architect the fall of a powerful man with such precision? The answer was about to be revealed, along with the devastating consequences that Diego would face for the coming years of his ruined life. 6 months later, Diego Mendoza's life had become an endless sequence of devastating consequences. The video of the public humiliation at the event had exceeded 5 million views, becoming a case studied in journalism schools about exhibition of social hypocrisy. The investigation triggered by Sophia revealed tax irregularities at Diego's company that dating back years. The IRS found that he had evaded taxes by using 2 different identities, resulting in fines that consumed 80% of his assets. The Mendoza Import Solutions went bankrupt in a matter of weeks. Margaret not only divorced him, but also filed an action for bigamy and marriage fraud. As the marriage was technically invalid, she was able to recover all the assets she had put in the couple's name, including the Gable Choir mansion. Diego was dumped from his own house. The most ironic thing was that Carmen had become a small local celebrity. Immigrant rights organizations sought her up to tell her story, and she got a fixed job as social assistance coordinator for Venezuelan families. The salary was not luxurious, but it was worthy, something Diego had never offered. Lucia, in turn, had been invited to give lectures at schools about children's courage and social justice. At age 8, she became the face of a campaign that raised funds for vulnerable immigrant children. The girl who asked for alms on the streets now had a savings account for college. Sophia won the Journalist of the Year award for the report that exposed Diego. His full article, entitled "The Man Who Deleted His Own Family," was republished in dozens of national and international vehicles, consolidating his career as an investigative. Diego, meanwhile, lived in an apartment of a room in Hialeah, working as a seller in an auto store. His former business contacts avoided him as a social plague. He had tried to start over again using the name Miranda, but the internet doesn't forget. A simple Google search immediately revealed its true identity. On a Thursday afternoon, 6 months after the public humiliation, Diego was leaving work when he saw a family scene. Lucia and Carmen walking down the street, but now wearing clean and new clothes, talking excitedly about weekend plans. He hid behind a car, watching his daughter he had abandoned. Lucia had grown in recent months, not physically, but in trust. Her eyes shone in a way that he had never seen when she asked for alms on the traffic light. "Mom," said Lucia, "do you think Dad learned something?" Carmen looked at her daughter proudly. "Piss. Some people only learn when they lose everything, but the important thing is that we learn that we are stronger than we thought." Diego felt a tear drain on his face. For the first time in years, he comprised the true cost of his choices. He had not only lost money or social status, he had lost his chance to meet the extraordinary daughter he had created without him. That night, alone in her tight apartment, Diego wrote a letter that would never have the courage to send. "Lucia, you taught me that some lessons cost more than we can pay. Thanks for showing me that true strength does not come from what you have. We are, but who we chose to be when no one is looking." Lucia never read this letter and probably wouldn't mind if she received it. She had learned that the best father is not the one who gives you money, but the one who teaches you to fight for what is right. And ironically, Diego had been the best teacher she could have, teaching for the negative example that some people simply don't deserve a second chance. Lucia's story spread across the country, inspiring other children in situations similar not to passively accept the injustices they faced. She proved that sometimes an 8-year-old child has more courage and moral integrity than an adult man with a 7-digit bank account. Diego tried to destroy his family to build a life of lies, but eventually destroyed himself. Lucia has learned that true revenge is not to return the abandonment suffered. It is to build such an extraordinary life that those who underestimated you realize the treasure they have lost through their own cowardice. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and share in the comments. Have you ever faced someone who tried to erase your existence? Because sometimes, the best answer to those who want to disappear is to shine so intensely that our light becomes impossible to ignore.